Welcome to this video about FireSmart in the arm of Harrison Park. And my name is Sean Fry. I'm the Deputy Chief with Onanole Fire Department and your FireSmart representative for the RM. With this video, I'd like to introduce you to our fire department, why we're a typical volunteer service, and what that means in terms of wildland fire and your house. I want to talk a little bit about FireSmart, what it is and why it's relevant in Manitoba, and especially now in this day and age, and what the situation is in our area, within our RM, in our communities, and a little bit about a community assessment and how we can make our communities more resistant to fire, and how we can empower landowners to be the first line of defense against fires in the interface between our forest and our homes. So this is a snapshot of our current, some of our current members of the Onanole Fire Department. We're 20 paid volunteers representing close to 200 years of service to the community within the rural municipality of Harrison Park, just south of Riding Mountain National Park in southwestern Manitoba. And we're fairly typical of the rural departments that you'll find across much of the prairies, serving our communities for structural fire and grass and wildland fire in between. So why are we concerned about wildland fire in the prairies? This picture or map from last fall indicates a situation that's becoming more and more common. So as you can see, here's the area we are in, and much of the summer was spent with fairly low precip across the prairies, high winds and drying conditions, and warmer than usual temperatures, resulting in extreme fire danger. And this is, you can find these maps online at any given time with Natural Resources Canada Fire Weather Map. This situation is becoming more and more common, creating scenarios where we're starting to see fires more frequently, both like lightning caused and burns that get away from people doing prescribed burns on their land, privately or even in public lands. This is the RM of Harrison Park and the RM of Clan William. This is Harrison Park. Here's the community of Onanole. The Sandy Lake Department and Onanole Department and Newdale Department cover the RM of Harrison Park, and the RM, as you can see in this map, the reds and pink colors represent areas of high intensity fires or extreme intensity fires, both mixed wood or coniferous forest, coniferous being like evergreen trees that have needles and keep them over winter. And then in the yellow we have grasslands or natural prairies or pasture lands, which are moderate intensity fires. And then lower intensity is deciduous trees, trees that lose their leaves in the winter, like aspen and shrubs and wetlands, although wetlands can sometimes be fairly volatile as well. But in terms of fire intensity, the more red you see in the area on this map, the more likely there will be a wildfire of high intensity adjacent to your home if you're in that area. So we have some areas that are highest concern for us are on the northeast part of the RM, northeast of Onanole, and up around Crawford Park area. There's also some stands of fairly intense coniferous forests that if they got going, the southwest of Horde as well, and then the northwest part of the RM. So what's changed in more recent years is we're starting to recognize that with these higher intensity fires, fire breaks that we considered in the past to make communities resilient to fire aren't doing the trick, because these bigger, higher intensity fires are spotting up to 1 to 2 kilometers or a mile away from the fire, and causing spot fires in communities. So we're looking at a new way of thinking in creating the fire break right around the buildings and making the communities the fire break, as opposed to making the fire breaks adjacent to the communities. And what that means is not taking down all the trees and vegetations around your home, but just doing a few things over time as you're cleaning up around your yard that will help make your home more fire resistant to fire and breaking the wildfire disaster cycle. What is the wildfire disaster cycle? Wildfire is a threat to your community and its neighborhoods. It's a two-way threat. The fire can spread from our homes into the forest and from the forest into our homes. And it can't be solved by having more firefighters and equipment. Once these type of fires get going, it very quickly overwhelms our capabilities, and it's simply a matter of waiting till the conditions are right for us to be able to fight it. In extreme conditions that we're getting, there's not a whole lot we can do other than try to get people out and away from the risk. There's very little chance with this type of fire that you see in the picture up in the top left that we'd be able to do much to stop that from rolling through a community. And solving this problem isn't happening. Depends more on what happens before the fire and our planning than in what we can do during the event. And it's mostly just what we can do in our backyards. So what we're talking about is mostly in what's described as a wildland urban interface. And essentially all that means is places where people want to live amongst the forest, and which makes sense because you want to live where there's more trees for shade and protection from the wind, especially on the prairies. And so structures and locations like these little pockets and subdivisions, you think naturally are at risk from wildfire, and you don't tend to think of communities outside of those areas as being at risk, but they are as much. They have as much to worry about wildfire as these houses that are interspersed amongst the trees, and with those firebrands that can travel between 1 and 2 kilometers from the fire. So, and the trend is upwards with climate change. We're getting more areas burned at higher intensities. We're seeing more development in wildland urban interface areas. People enjoy living there, being close to nature. And we're finding as fire is excluded from areas for long periods of time, the fuel loads build up, and we're getting more challenges with insect disease and standing dead forests that create a lot of fuel ready to go. And another risk in our RM is the tornado that passed through a couple of years ago has now left a lot of standing and dead fuel as well. And so those kind of situations all to come together to create potential for a wildland urban interface disaster with the potential evacuations and losses of homes. So So to give you a little bit of a picture, this is a satellite image from last fall. So here's the Onanole Hall, Fire Hall, the community Onanole down near the bottom, the Highway 10 going up into the park, and the town site of Wasagaming. And you can see from this image, over time, there's a new subdivision out here to the west of Highway 10, with houses going in along this area, and all the places you don't see from the highway are all these sprawling little subdivisions to the northeast part of Onanole. And these are the areas where we have some of the highest concerns about risk of wildland fire coming either out of the park or between communities. All these communities are linked with mixed wood forest, and in some cases some heavy deciduous or heavy coniferous forest, as in the case of this subdivision highlighted northwest of Highway 262, which only has one way in and out. So we'll have to work closely with a lot of these communities to help build more resilience to wildland fire into the future. This other community highlighted is Meadow Green Estates, which is currently working towards assessing their community and becoming more involved with FireSmart. They may be one of the first communities in the province to implement a FireSmart program. But there's certainly many opportunities within our RM to build on that program. There's another view using vegetation analysis. You can see the darker green areas are more coniferous forest, and the lighter color areas are more deciduous and agricultural land. So it gives you a bit of a picture of the area that we're looking at. And then this is a land classification that shows the different types of open, developed land, disturbed land. The darker greens are those blocks of coniferous forest that will have the highest intensity burns. And then you can see some grasslands and deciduous forest mixed in. So here's an example of what can happen over time, and subdivisions planned. This one was in a fairly open agricultural land when it was first developed. I actually remember when this was set up, and trees are planted. This is from 2004, so it's a fairly new subdivision. This is Meadow Green. And then now, this is only from a couple of years ago, you can see a lot of those trees now have grown up, and the branches are touching or bridging across between the trees, and so you get a kind of continuous line of fuels in from the thick fuels that are right into the park. So we'll be trying to work with the community to look at options to make that a little more resistant to a fire coming through. And so the idea with FireSmart is the highest priority areas are right adjacent to your house. So from decisions on what type of siding to put on and what roofing materials you use, but more critically, what is within the first few feet of the house. Making sure your wood pile isn't stacked right against the outside of the house, or that there isn't a buildup of materials underneath your deck that could, if a firebrand got in underneath, that would start up your deck and then your house. Some small things when you're cleaning up your yard that will help make this priority zone 1 within 10 meters of your house or 30 feet fairly resistant to fire. And then as you go further out in priority zone 2, you're just making sure the trees aren't too thick. And you can have coniferous trees in that zone. You just want them spaced out a bit more and limbed so that there's no ladder fuels to climb up and really get any fire kind of going through there. And the priority zone 3 would be goes out to about 70 meters and includes more community green spaces and that people can work on collectively as a neighborhood if the land is part of that community. So if we look at the meadow green example, here's where all the buildings are currently, and if we put a buffer of 10 meters, that would be the yellow zone just immediately around the buildings, so you can get an idea for scale. So that's the zone you want to have fairly resistant to fire, and then as you go further out to that 70 meters, you can get an idea of how big an area that really means. And as a community, that's not a huge area to have to manage, but it would require working together as a community, and so that's why the program really aims to empower landowners, as they are really the critical part of that priority zone 1, and it's under the landowner's control. And so that's why it's important that we're providing information like this helps them reduce the risk of fire to their property. And it's really about neighbors helping neighbors. This is the FireSmart program. It's based on a U.S. program that's had good success. So it's a community grassroots-based program called FireWise down there, and it was adopted up in Canada as FireSmart. And the idea is it targets this problem. It's driven by the residents, so it's not dependent on some government agency to organize it. It's really up to the residents who want to see this happen. And we're supported by fire agencies and government departments on adjacent landowners. Parks Canada has been a strong proponent of FireSmart for many years, and now the rural municipalities and Office of Fire Commissioner are advocating the program as well throughout the province. So hopefully in future, once more communities get into this program, it will start to be recognized, and you may even see benefits with insurance agencies looking to see that these programs are implemented as a way to improve fire resistance of the communities. So it's a brief snapshot or introduction to FireSmart. If anyone would like me as the RM representative for FireSmart to come talk to a group of communities or people, please let me know. I'm more than willing to come out and help with community assessments or setting up programs, trying to do cleanup sessions, or and what sort of things, small things you can do around your home to help make it more fire smart. Thank you for your time.